Welcome back to the deep dive. You're here because you love to really get into a topic
That's right.
without getting overwhelmed with all the little details.
For sure.
And today,
Yeah.
we are going way back today. I mean, really far back.
Okay.
We are diving into the ancient, like really ancient concept of the sin offering
Okay.
as it's described in the book of Leviticus chapter 4.
All right. So Leviticus. We're talking about a section of really old text
Right.
that details some very specific rituals. And I guess our mission today is to really break down the core parts of these offerings.
Yeah.
What are the key differences between them?
Right.
Particularly looking at these unintentional sins. Mistakes.
Unrectional.
Yeah, unintentional sins or mistakes made by different people
Okay.
within the ancient Israelite community.
Gotcha. So give us a little bit of context here. So ancient Israelite community, we're talking about thousands of years ago.
Oh, yeah, definitely a long time ago.
Okay. And when we say sin offering, I mean, right off the bat, the text makes a very clear distinction.
Yes.
It's about unintentional sins. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge distinction.
Yeah.
Because we're not talking about deliberate acts
Yeah.
of disobedience or rebellion.
Right. It's those times when somebody, didn't mean to.
Mm.
They unknowingly went against
Right.
whatever the divine commands were.
Exactly.
Or they just messed up. Just a genuine error.
And it really highlights how their system
Yeah.
recognized that even without meaning to,
Right.
our actions can have consequences.
Huh.
And that those consequences needed to be addressed, even for mistakes.
So there was this sense of needing to make things right.
Totally.
Even if you didn't mean to do it.
Yeah.
But there was still this sense of like, okay, we've got to,
We got to fix this.
we got to fix this somehow.
Yeah, I think that's powerful.
And the way they would try to make things right was through this idea of atonement.
That's exactly it.
Right. So to try to repair
Repair that
the damage that had been done.
the brokenness.
Yeah, and ultimately lead to forgiveness.
Forgiveness is the goal. That's the intended outcome.
Now, this wasn't something that just anybody could just do on their own.
Mm-hmm.
The priest had a very specific role in all of this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the priest was essential. They were the intermediary,
Right.
the one authorized to carry out these rituals.
Yeah.
And they had to do it according to very specific guidelines.
Right. It wasn't just like, winging it. It
Yeah,
was very
here from
prescribed. So this really highlights how structured.
It was a very
Central
structured
system.
system, and it also highlights the roles
Yeah.
that different people played within the community.
Now, there's this action that we see throughout these descriptions in Leviticus.
Okay.
And it's this idea of the laying on of hands. You lay your hands on the animal.
Yeah, you put your hands on the animal.
So what was the point of that?
Yeah.
What did that symbolize?
I think it's such a powerful image. You're putting your hands on the animal's head,
Right.
and you're basically transferring your sin
Uh,
and its consequences onto the animal, like a substitution.
okay.
And it's just a very visual representation
Yeah.
of what's happening spiritually.
Then we see the actual slaughtering of the animal.
Yes.
And it always specifies that this takes place before the Lord
Right.
at the entrance to what's called the tent of meeting,
Mhm.
or the place of the burnt offering.
Right.
So the location seems really intentional here.
It's
Like, why there? Why not just anywhere?
Yeah, no, it was a specific place. You're right. The tent of meeting,
Okay.
that was basically their central place of worship. It's where they believed God's presence
Right.
was most strongly felt.
So this was like the most sacred spot.
Yes, it was
Okay.
a really big deal.
Okay. So then we get to the blood. And it wasn't just like any old spilling of blood. There were very specific ways that the blood was supposed to be used.
Right.
Sprinkling it, putting it on the horns of the altars,
Yeah.
pouring it out at the base. It's very specific.
They didn't just make this up.
Right.
No, they had a plan.
So break down some of these uses of the blood. Like, what was the point of that?
Well, the different ways they used the blood were crucial. Like,
Yeah.
for example, sprinkling the blood in
Uh-huh.
front of the curtain of the sanctuary.
Right.
And they had to do it 7 times.
7.
7. That number in their tradition usually signifies completeness
Okay.
or covenant
Right. And that curtain was the barrier
Yeah. between the holy place,
the Holy of Holies.
yeah, and the rest of the tent.
Right.
So that sprinkling probably symbolized purification and gaining access
Okay.
to that holy space.
So kind of like cleansing.
Yes, cleansing and access.
Okay. Now, there was also the putting of the blood on the horns of the altars.
Right, and there were 2 altars.
Okay.
We had the altar of fragrant incense, which was inside the tent of meeting,
Uh-huh.
and it represented their prayers
Okay.
rising up to God.
Okay.
And then you had the altar of burnt offering. So placing the blood on the horns of both these altars marked those objects as sacred,
Okay.
and by extension, the entire sanctuary.
So it was kind of like a consecration.
Yes, a consecration.
Yeah, okay.
And then the remaining blood, they would pour it out at the base of the altar of burnt offering.
Okay. And that one was always outside.
Always outside.
Okay. So maybe that was kind of like finalizing the whole ritual.
Yeah, like solidifying the offering. Like it's done.
Okay. Now let's get into the specifics for the different types of offerings.
Okay.
Starting with the one for the anointed priest.
That's a big one. I mean, they required a young bull
Okay.
without any defects.
So not just any old bull.
No, not just any bull. This is like the best of the best.
The top tier bull.
The top tier.
Right. And what did they do with the blood for this one?
So the blood, they would carry it into the tent of meeting.
Okay, into the tent.
Into the tent. They would sprinkle it 7 times before that curtain, the curtain of the sanctuary.
Okay.
And then they'd put it on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense.
The one inside.
The one inside, yeah. And then the rest of the blood, they would pour it out.
At the base?
At the base of the altar of burnt offering.
Right, okay. And then the animal itself, like what did they do with the bull's body?
Oh, so the fat, they would remove it and burn it on the altar of burnt offering.
Okay, so that was pretty standard.
Yeah, pretty standard. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
The rest of the bull, like the hide, the meat.
All of it.
All of it. Head, legs, organs.
Everything.
Everything. Gone. They would take it outside the camp.
Oh, wow.
To a clean place and burn it all. This symbolized like a complete purging of the sin.
Wow. Okay. So really emphasizing.
Just huge emphasis.
Yeah, the weight of the priest's position.
Absolutely. Because a sin by the priest was seen as something that could bring guilt on the whole community.
So if you are listening out there, think about it this way. The actions of those in positions of leadership, especially religious leadership in this case, carry so much weight.
So much weight.
That even their unintentional mistakes can have ripple effects.
Ripple effects.
On everyone else.
Absolutely.
So there's this heightened sense of responsibility. Now, what about when the entire Israelite community sinned unintentionally? What happened then?
So when the whole community messed up, it's interesting.
Okay.
They used the same offering as for the priest, a young bull.
Same bull.
Same top-tier bull without any defects.
Okay.
And the rituals with the blood were almost identical. They would take the blood into the tent, sprinkle it 7 times, put it on the horns of that inner altar, and then pour the rest out at the base of the outer altar.
Okay, so same blood rituals.
Same blood rituals.
But there was this added element of the elders being involved.
Right. The elders representing the whole community, they would lay their hands on the bull's head before it was slaughtered.
Okay, so that was different.
Yes, that's a new step. And it shows you that the community as a whole was taking responsibility.
Okay.
They were all participating in this process of asking for forgiveness.
So it wasn't just the priest doing it for them?
No, they were all involved.
They were all acknowledging?
Owning it.
Yeah, they were owning their part in it.
Together.
And how did they handle the bull in this case?
Same as with the priest's offering. They burned the whole thing outside the camp.
So again, emphasizing the seriousness.
Total seriousness.
Yeah, when the whole community,
unintentionally
unintentionally goes astray.
Right, it's a big deal.
All right. Now let's move on to the offering for a leader.
All right.
So not the high priest.
No.
But somebody else in a position of authority.
Yes, like a tribal leader. Someone important within the community.
And for them, the offering changes a bit.
It does change. Now, they require a male goat without any defects.
A goat, not a bull.
Right, a step down from the bull.
Right.
Which is interesting because it shows you how the type of animal starts to change depending on who made the mistake.
So the animal reflects.
It reflects their role in the community and the potential impact of their sin.
Gotcha.
So for a leader, a male note.
Okay. And what about the blood rituals and the handling of the animal for the leader's offering?
So they would slaughter the goat in the same place as the burnt offering.
Okay.
Which, remember, that's outside the tent of meeting.
Right.
For the blood, they would put some of it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering.
The outer altar?
The outer altar, that's right. And they'd pour the rest out at the base of that same altar.
Okay.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. For the animal's body, they would burn all the fat on the altar. Similar to what they did for the fellowship offering.
So that's a little different.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shift. Maybe indicating a different level of consequence or a different way of making things right compared to the priest or the whole community.
Now, let's talk about the sin offering for just any regular person in the community.
For the average individual, they would offer a female goat, again, without defect.
Still a goat.
Still a goat.
But a female this time.
This time a female. And they would slaughter it in the same place as the burnt offering, outside the tent of meeting. And what about the blood and the body of the animal?
Yeah, tell us about that.
The blood ritual was basically the same as for the leader. They'd put some blood on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. And pour the rest out at its base. And for the animal, all the fat was removed and burned on the altar. And this was done as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Which again connects it to the fellowship offering.
So there's definitely some similarities there.
Definitely.
In how things are done. Finally, there's the option of bringing a lamb as a sin offering.
So a lamb was also an option for individuals. And if they chose a lamb, it had to be female.
Female lamb?
Female lamb, no defects.
And where did they slaughter it?
Same place as the others, at the place of the burnt offering.
Outside?
Yeah, outside the tent.
So what happened with the lamb specifically?
Same blood ritual. They would put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of burnt offering.
And pour the rest out at the base. And then for the lamb's body, they would remove all the fat and burn it on the altar. But this time, they specifically mentioned that it's burned on top of the food offerings.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like they're connecting it to the food offering.
It's almost like it's being incorporated.
Incorporated into the food offering.
Yeah, into that other ritual. So we've gone through all these different scenarios from Leviticus chapter 4.
Yes, we've covered a lot.
What are some of the big takeaways here? Like, what really stands out?
Well, one of the most obvious things is that the type of animal you had to offer really depended on who had sinned. You know, the priest and the whole community. They needed a young bull. That was the most significant offering. A leader would offer a male goat, and an individual could offer a female goat or a female lamb.
So there's this clear hierarchy.
There's definitely a hierarchy.
Yeah, in terms of both responsibility and the impact of the sin.
So the animal you brought really said something.
It said a lot.
Yeah, about your place in the community.
Absolutely.
And the seriousness of the offense.
Yeah.
Now, the priest's role seemed to be the same across all these different offerings.
Totally. No matter who sinned or what animal they brought, the priest was always the one who did the blood rituals and oversaw the burning of the fat.
So they were always the intermediary.
Yeah, always the intermediary.
Now, despite all these differences in the details, the ultimate goal of all these offerings was the same. It was about achieving atonement and receiving forgiveness.
Forgiveness, that's the key.
It didn't matter who you were.
It doesn't matter who you are.
Or what you did.
It's about making things right.
It was about making things right. But one thing that's really striking is the difference in how they dealt with the animal's body.
That's a big one.
For the priest and the whole community, they burned the entire animal outside the camp.
Everything.
But for the leader and the individual, they just burned the fat on the altar. So why that difference? What do you think was going on there?
That's a great question. And scholars have come up with a lot of possible explanations. One thought is that the total burning for the priest and community might have symbolized a more complete removal of the sin. Like, it was such a big deal. It had to be completely eradicated.
Because it affected everyone.
It could potentially contaminate the whole community.
Gotcha. Whereas the individual sins, maybe they didn't have that same level of
widespread.
Widespread impact. So maybe burning the fat was enough.
Like a symbolic gesture of purification.
Interesting.
It really makes you think.
So for our listeners out there, as you think about these rituals and how detailed they are and how specific they are, what do you think this reveals about this ancient community? What do you think it tells us about how they understood sin, how they understood forgiveness? What about their ideas of leadership, individual responsibility?
It's really interesting to consider those questions.
Do these ancient practices have any resonance for us today?
Do they connect with how we view accountability?
Or are they completely foreign to us?
It's really something to think about.
It is. And we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.